Welcome to the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting today, this Tuesday, November the 10th. I'd like to start by saying our chair this morning, Commissioner Bozovich, is in Salem, I believe at a task force meeting for community corrections funding. So he's doing county business and is excused from today's meeting. So with that, we'll get started with adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move into item number 2, which is public comment. At this time, we allocate 20 minutes plus to speakers and allow them up to 3 minutes to speak. So when I call your name, I'd ask you to come to the podium. Please state your name and I guess the city that you live in, and we'll start your 3 minutes. And the first person is Chaz Dutoit? Dutoit, thank you. Do you have a timer?
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Chaz Dutoit. I'm the President of the Board of Directors of the Friends of Buford Park. And I placed a letter before you that the Friends of Buford Park in Mount Pisgah commends the Large Events Task Force for their substantial and diligent work, culminating in their final report dated October 5th, 2015. We urge the Lane County Board of Commissioners to fully endorse the recommendations from the LETF as written. We believe the recommendations place common sense limitations on large events in the Howard Buford Recreation Area and provide adequate protection for regular park visitors, neighbors, and the native ecosystem. So we want to urge you to accept those recommendations, and I want to really give a shout out to that task force. I attended many of their meetings, and particularly John Helmer as the chair did a substantial amount of effort for the county, and their work should be commended. On a separate note, I also wanted to encourage the board to consider the county administrator's recommendation to put a hold on the Parks and Open Spaces Master Plan draft, and to allow some expert advice to come in to support that, and also the Blue Lagoon Commission that's been proposed. And I think those are important things. And I want to also tell you that I think you've done an outstanding job hiring your county administrator. He's really done a fabulous job and did a really nice presentation to the Parks Advisory Committee last evening in support of the work that they're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Larry Dunlap.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Larry Dunlap. I live in South Eugene. I'm a member of the Parks Advisory Committee and the Large Events Task Force, and a monthly contributor to Howard Buford Park Recreation Area. You may be told that there's a unanimous consent for this tonight, and I can tell you that it is not unanimous, that some of us feel that the representation of Lane County's average citizen was kind of lacking on this committee. You chose 5 members to represent CV Loop neighbors. You chose 5 more that represent vested interest in Howard Buford Recreation Park, and there were only 5 of us left to speak for the interests that might be from promoters or just general park users. I think we've come up with some guidelines that, if followed strictly, make it impossible to hold large events at Emerald Meadows again, and probably make it very difficult for anything but the most optimistic and well-funded and persistent of promoters to get any large event going in this county. And remember, we had large events here that were well received by the community. I mean, Fairy World and Dirty Dance and Scout Jamborees and Civil War reenactments, all these things everyone enjoyed and had a good time with at Emerald Meadows until the Kaleidoscope event came on. Now, obviously, we need regulation. We need county parks that can stop a process that's going on when someone violates the contract provisions. But if we follow step by step all the environmental and habitat and various ideas that are incorporated in this very inclusive and hard work report that the Commission gives to us, I think we're going to make it difficult for these events to occur at all. And I'm not, with a 71 to 93% favorite when we poll, that many people are in favor in this county of having large events on our parks. It gives the parks a chance to be introduced to people that might not ordinarily go there. There are some of us that perhaps only go for large events and aren't daily users of the parks. And I think our parklands are not necessarily preserves of nature, but they're here to be enjoyed by all of us for what they are. And in that respect, I would hope the commissioners will look at this report and not take it as adopted overall, but to look at the constituents parts of it and consider that some of them might be a little overly restrictive. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jim Evanuk.
I'm Jim Evanuk. I live on Seavey Loop, next to Mount Pisgah. Our home is closer than anyone else's to the main stage of when they had large music events. In response to Mr. Dunlap's statement, I'm not opposed to large events. What I am opposed to are drug, alcohol-fueled music events. This is my granddaughter. She's met Pat. Her name is Lizzie. Her and her sister, in 15 years, I don't want them to go to a county-sponsored rock festival and be imposed by that drug and alcohol use. And everyone says, well, that was just Kaleidoscope. Make no doubt about it, there was drugs and noise at Ferry World. I mean, I attended several Ferry World things, and it's not as mellow as you think it is. There was I think he was convicted in Lane County of a child, not abuse, but molestation at that event. I think it was 3 years ago. I think large events are good. I have nothing against a Civil War reenactment. Lizzie and I have gone to the mushroom show, to the wildflower show. It's educational. It's not there to raise money for the Parks Department. I think the Parks Department has no business being in concert promotions. At the last LETF meeting, or maybe the one before the last, Mike Russell said, I guarantee there will not be another Kaleidoscope, and there won't be anything like Ferry World. And I was glad to hear that, but it's not written in stone. And I think to gain the neighbors' trust back, if they would take out that electric substation that they have directly across from our house that is feeding the North Bottomlands, it serves no purpose now. I was over there this morning, the meter's running, so you're paying some kind of a bill monthly. It's an enormous line, but EPUD put it in and EPUD can take it out. You can thereby save money on your electricity bill. Everybody's looking to cut corners. That might be one way. Let me segue a little bit into the master plan. Last night and in the newspaper I read that they're going to have a blue ribbon task force. It was brought up at last night's PAC meeting by Mr. Dunlap that you're giving out first place for a task force that hasn't even been organized yet. Why you're calling it a blue ribbon task force, I don't know. I've gone to several 4-H fairs. You have to work to get the blue ribbon.
Jim, can you wrap it up, please?
I can wrap it up. Okay. As far as rewriting the entire master plan, I don't think it's necessary. You can go through and just pick out, go through it. We don't like this, we don't like that, let's change that. But to start over from scratch, I think is a waste of time and money. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Milt, and it looks like Lucknow.
That's it.
Okay.
I have my snake killer here. Well, first of all, I'm not really sure I'm invited. I don't see Elmira on there anywhere. But the guy's right about drugs and stuff. But listen to this. Mayo Clinic says the use of marijuana can shorten your life 3 to 7 years. So maybe there's too many people in the world. But that isn't what I'm here for. What I'm here for is wondering why the parks close so early in the season. People still have picnics and family reunions, and it would bring in extra money. But what I was really wondering is just the example, Perkins Peninsula out there. Lovely place. And if you get some of the inmates, here's a three-way winner, get some of the inmates out of the jail and go in there and either build little RV spaces which you could rent year-round, or put a area out there for boats so people could, park their boats in there and generate other income as well. And then here's one more thing that has nothing to do with the parks, but it could, because you could use some of the money, is on, I live on the corner of Butler and Sheffer, and I drive up the hills all the time, and I'm supposed to be having a 60-foot right-of-way. That's what they told me that's what I was given the property for anyway. And so there's trees all along the way that are in that right-of-way. And I would suggest getting some more inmates with a professional to get up there and cut some of those trees, so you got a three-way winner. You get the income. The highways are better. The roads will be better because the sun can get at them, and it wouldn't, they deteriorate when there's no sunshine to dry out underneath. And third, the inmates would get a day off for every day they work there. It would cost less to incarcerate people. So it'd be a three-time winner. And basically, that's what I'm here for. And I'm wondering, about why, like I say, the parks are closed so early and so forth. And why not get that keep generating that little income all the time? And like I say, there's more parks than Perkins Peninsula that you could put those RVs in, or a place to park boats and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's just might be additional income. And I know we could always use it. And don't be like the city of Eugene, who somebody thinks they need to pay $15 an hour when the little small business that might be doing business with the city, how are they going to pay $15 an hour and make a living? And they'd be closing the businesses. So is it best to give $15 an hour to some and close the little businesses? That's just something on the side. So anyway, I thank you, gentlemen, and I got an appointment with my insurance people, so I guess I better be on my way. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mel. And the last person to sign up is Mary Moore. Looks like I might have some more, but Mary?
My name's Mary Moore. I live on Seavey Loop. I was one of the 4 neighbors on the large event task force. I want to thank all of you for allowing neighbors to be on that task force so that there was some local impacted opinions being able to be given. I know there was a lot of meetings where I felt the not in my backyard vibe towards me, but I was calling upon my experiences with Mount Pisgah, and I felt like if we had gone through that, I didn't want to see other neighborhoods have to go through the same thing, so I did base my opinions and votes on what I would assume other neighborhoods felt. We didn't have a lot of other neighborhoods come to our meetings till, I think it was about April or May. There were more neighborhoods learned about it. Some came to the public input session that was in June, I believe. And when those other neighbors came, it reaffirmed what I had felt, that I wasn't the only person that felt like this. So I do want to thank you for that opportunity. There's a few things in the final recommendations that I'm really happy about. I'm glad for the restrictions that were put on Pisgah. It seems to keep more in line with what has been going on there with the Arboretums events and the Play in the Rain. The troubles never seemed to start until the North Bottomlands became developed. So I also disagree with Larry Dunlap that we don't want large events. The neighborhood is fine with the events that have been going on for 25 or more years. I also want to say there was one piece that we came up with that was an oversight group made up of different listings. You'll see it in your report. I'm really hoping that you will approve that. I think it's important to have neighbors of impacted parks be on an oversight group so that they can review it first. It might save a lot of complaints after the fact. And I also want to acknowledge that Mr. Mokahiski seems to be very open and concerned about citizens' input. I went to the PAC meeting last night and he gave a very good presentation about the update on the master plan, and it seems like your new administrator is hearing the regular citizens, and I want to thank you for that. Seems like he's taking good steps to make the government more open and transparent, and I think it's a good change from the last administration. It does seem like things are changing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Pat Hoover.
Good morning, Vice Chair Stewart, Commissioners, County Administrator. My name is Pat Hoover. I live in District 4. I have come to you a number of times in the past several months wearing different hats, and today I come to you as the chairwoman of the Parks Advisory Committee. And I come to you to report that we had a meeting last night, and in that meeting we took a vote, and the majority vote was to endorse the large event task force report as written. And we would like to have you give that your approval when you deliberate about that in your agenda later this morning. In giving you this recommendation, the Parks Advisory Committee is joining the county administrator, the Public Works Director, and the Parks Division Manager in wanting to have this report approved as written. I'll put on another hat. As a park activist and a park advocate, I attended the majority of those 20 sessions over 18 months that hard-working group of 14 volunteer citizens went through in forming this large event task force report. It was an incredible amount of work. I watched it develop and the consensus come through, and it is a much-needed piece to be added to the Park and Open Space Master Plan that is ongoing right now and being written, the new version of that. And I think that including that document and report into the body of the master plan and approving that as written would go a long way toward helping Lane County Parks move forward in a really positive manner in the future. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. That's everybody that signed up. Is there anyone else that would like to give comment this morning? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment. I want to thank everybody for coming, and their comments were presented well. Move to item 3, which is the Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrance. Any comments? Commissioner Sorensen?
Thank you very much for everyone that's come this morning to give public comment. This 3-minute opportunity for citizens to come in, give their perspective on important issues is, I think, a highlight of local government. I started my career in government working in the U.S. Congress, and they don't have a 3-minute comment period in the U.S. Congress, and they don't have it when the committees meet. And when I was an Oregon State Senator, I learned that they don't have a 3-minute comment period either. So you can go to your hearings of all the committees and you can sit there and watch it, and that's good. Most of the sessions of both the U.S. Congress and the Oregon legislature are open to the public to watch, but not participate, not actually say anything, at least say anything without being arrested. There are the occasional protests, and people try to say things, and then they're escorted out. So this is a unique opportunity that local government, maybe it's just local government in Oregon, but I know most of our cities and public bodies do this in Oregon, and I think it's a great tradition. We have had some frequent flyers here who have come every day for 2 or 3 years in a row. That hasn't happened recently, but it did test my support for the 3-minute comment period, but I never did break. I always favored the 3-minute comment period per person per day. So you don't lose on any future opportunity by commenting today. So I think it's a great tradition. And I know since I've been an elected official, I've actually used it. I've gone to other boards and bodies, and it's nice to be able to show up when they begin and give you 3 minutes and leave if you want to, or watch the whole thing. So anyway, I just wanted to say rah-rah for the 3-minute rule, and I hope we keep it here. And I want to thank everybody's involvement, particularly in the Lane County Parks and future of the parks and the challenges we face. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Acting Chair. And thanks for being here today. Great comment from everyone involved. And I'd like to call out John Helmer, who chaired the Large Events Task Force, all 20-plus meetings, I think. And I attended a couple of them, and they were long meetings, very detailed-oriented meetings, and a great product that you and your committee came up with, John. Thank you for doing that. And thanks to everyone who testified today. I was at the meeting last night, and apologize to all of you that I left early. I had to attend a River Road Neighbors meeting talking about some homeless issues that have been occurring in the River Road Neighbors meeting. And Mr. Muckerheisky had shared with me what he was going to say ahead of time, and I'm glad that you received what he had to say very well. Thanks for the testimony today. A lot of work has gone into the large groups task force, and a lot of work I anticipate is going to be going into the master plan work, whether it's called a Blue Ribbon Committee or whether it's called a task force, whatever it may be called. I'm looking forward to a very deliberative process that will ultimately produce a very solid and strong product. That's what I'm anticipating. And it's not going to be a short process, and it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a good product at the end. I'm positive of that. Commissioner Sorensen mentioned public hearings. I love the public hearings too. I spent 10 years on the Eugene City Council, and sometimes I actually saw the sun come up the next morning during public hearings. They don't do that anymore, but one time in June, when the sun comes up early, the public hearing, I looked out, and yeah, that was a glimmer of light in the sky. So public hearings are very, very valuable. I'll be providing testimony at a public hearing next Tuesday up in Salem in front of a health committee. And Commissioner Sorensen mentioned that the Senate didn't hear public hearings. When I was in the House of Representatives, in committees, we did have public hearings that sometimes lasted quite a long time. So it's a great way for people to get their opinion known. And really, it's a great opportunity, whether it's this meeting, whether it's the Poverty and Homelessness Board, wherever you happen to testify. It's an opportunity to really have people listen very closely to what you have to say. People who normally you might find yourself having to listen to. You get to have them listen to you. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And Mr. Chair, is now time for Commissioner comments other than responses, or shall I save that until the end of the meeting?
Let's save them for the end of the meeting.
I can do that. Very good. I was going to give a report on Operation 365 and a report on the Poverty and Homelessness Board, which I will save until the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Lyken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I just want to say thank you very much to those who came and testified this morning, also for everyone who showed up here to listen to the board. But before I get started, I really want to give a hearty congratulations to Warren Buffett and his company, Berkshire Hathaway, as President Obama did not approve the Keystone Pipeline. If you didn't know, that Berkshire Hathaway actually owns BNSF Railroad, the largest carrier of oil in the United States. So I want to congratulate Warren on that excellent coup. The 1% keep increasing. So congratulations to Berkshire Hathaway on that. But I would also like to comment. Thank you for the comments this morning. And so, Mr. Evanek, the Blue Ribbon Task Force is kind of a common name, I guess, of government. I actually put together 2 or 3 of them when I was mayor. One addressed roads, the other actually addressed public safety. And as you know, in Springfield, we have 24/7 coverage and the largest municipal jail now in the state of Oregon, and has cleaned up the nuisance crime issue in Springfield tremendously. But it's a common name. I used to show livestock too, and I get what you mean, so appreciate that. But I think overall, I just want to say thank you for the comments. I look forward to the comments from Mr. Mokarysky as well as Mr. Russell. I think Marcia Miller, I saw her briefly. Maybe she's not here now. Oh, there she is. Hi, Marcia. And especially when we get into the aspect of the parks issue, but also the large events task force. And again, thank you for those who served on that task force. I really, really appreciate it. I think it was good work. And I think it gives us an opportunity to kind of reset this and take a look where we go from here. I'm not a big supporter of county promoting type of concerts. I think that should be left to the promoters who would contract with the county if that were something to move forward. So that's my opinion on that, but looking forward to it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Farr?
Just one thing I overlooked, and Ms. Hoover, Pat, last night after the meeting, I was talking to Dale Stoneberg, who was a member of the Parks Committee. I believe he resigned this morning. But we were talking about members of the Parks Advisory Board and the large group task force, and talking about how many parks in the county that they may have actually, how many of the 70 parks in the county that they may have visited, parks, boat landings, etc. And Dale Stoneberg told me that he is pretty sure that you have gone to all 70 parks in the county. So a pretty big call out there. You take your work very, very seriously, and thank you for doing that.
Okay. Thank you. Next, is there any emergency business?
No.
Okay. Item 5 is the consent calendar. This is a routine item where we have items on here that we approve. You can go to the lanecounty.org website and view these items if you see fit. So is there a motion to approve the consent item?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 4-0. Okay. Next is item 7, county administration. We've got a couple minutes. Mr. Mokarysky, do you have any announcements?
Sure. Just 1 minute I'll take for announcements. Share with you a couple groups that I and some commissioners have had the opportunity to speak with recently. Commissioner Lyken and I spoke to the Local Government Affairs Committee of the Springfield Chamber a few weeks ago. Forgot to report on that, and just wanted to make a note that it's the 3rd or 4th time I think we've been there in the past year, and always enjoy having an opportunity to speak to businesses in the Springfield area and talk about issues happening in Lane County. I will be leaving our exec session, if it's still going on, at about 11:30, 11:45 today, because I'm speaking to the Leadership Eugene Springfield group, which is, as many of you know, a group of professionals in Eugene and Springfield and the surrounding area that participate, and it's organized by both chambers in Eugene and Springfield, and they coordinate a leadership program for aspiring leaders in the community. It's a great networking opportunity for professionals to learn, to build relationships, and to learn about the different agencies and issues facing the community. So I have the pleasure of speaking to them about Lane County government, what we do, what our role in the community is, the services that we provide, and the issues and challenges that we face. So I look forward to that. And then I'll be speaking at the Local Government Affairs Committee of the Eugene Chamber in 2 weeks. And so, again, always a pleasure to get around the community and talk about the issues that we're working on. And then I just wanted to remind the board that, and the public for that matter, for anyone who's interested, next Monday, November 16th, we will have the grand opening of the Delta Oaks Clinic. And that will be at 10:30 a.m. I'm not sure what color the ribbon is that's going to be used for cutting. But that is Monday, November 16th at 10:30 a.m. And invite all the commissioners. I believe Commissioner Bozovich will be sharing comments. Alicia Hayes is emceeing the event. And again, a wonderful celebration of our partnership with Trillium. They've contributed $1 million towards that community health center. And another opportunity for us to serve the 90,000 residents in Lane County through our health centers. That's all I have, Mr. Chair, unless you have questions.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any questions, so we'll move to item B. It's order 15-11-10-09. In the matter of accepting the recommendation of the County Administrator's Lane County Parks Large Event Task Force and directing staff to implement the recommendations into regular administrative processes for acceptance, review and approval of the large event applications, and to incorporate recommendations as appropriate into the next Lane County Parks Master Plan update. So we have with us Mr. Russell, our Parks and Animal Services Division Manager, and we have Mr. Helmer, Chair of the Large Events Task Force. Good morning and welcome.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'd like to make a couple of introductory comments, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Helmer and Mr. Russell to walk through the details of the proposal for you. But I will say that I think it was in the first week or two that I started here at Lane County that we had a number of public discussions about large events in county parks, and the board created this task force. And so we have worked over the course of the past year and a half. Really, Mr. Helmer, the volunteers that served on the task force, Mr. Russell and our park staff, just have done an outstanding job. 20 meetings, as you know, over that period of time. I had the opportunity to attend 3 of those meetings. One of them, one of the last meetings that I was at, there was a woman there who was on the task force and was there till about 10 o'clock at night. Meeting, talking about trying to wrap up the work. She had her 8-year-old daughter, I believe, in the hallway with her. So you want to talk about dedication of our residents who didn't get paid anything to do this, right? They showed up for 20 meetings over a year, and they ran, in my experience, from what I witnessed and from everyone that I had conversations with about this process, it was thorough, it was diligent, they really, and it was balanced. They listened to the different voices throughout the community. The task force representation included folks who are promoters and part of the entertainment industry and members of Travel Lane County. It included residents of the CV Loop area. It included the Arboretum and the Friends of Buford Park and partners agencies. So a broad and diverse stakeholder group that participated over a year in those 20 meetings. They had a number of public meetings and surveys and outreach that was done. I believe over 1,300 public comments were gathered throughout this effort, and a lot of different opinions. At the end of the day, they reached what we believe, and let me say, the core issue, as we talk about here in the report, the core issue at hand for this task force has been balancing the fundamental purpose of our park system to provide open space, recreation, and natural resources for all people with the demand for large events. And that's a balancing act, right? Because they're individuals, residents, and visitors to our community that appreciate and enjoy large events in our parks and the wonderful environment that we have here. And we also want to make sure that we preserve our park and open space land for the best interest of all people. And so the recommendations we believe that the Large Events Task Force is making are in the common good of both our people and our natural spaces. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Helmer and ask him to walk through the recommendations with you, but I want to offer my appreciation and thanks to Mr. Helmer and the members of the task force. In my going on 17 years in public service in 3 different states and a number of counties, and having worked a lot with citizen task forces and committees and advisory groups, this is one of the, if not the best, certainly one of the best public engagement efforts that I have witnessed and been a part of, and that's really a credit to the individuals who were part of the process and the thoughtful dialogue that they participated in. And I will say that as we pivot to future issues on parks and on other issues in Lane County, I think we have a great opportunity to learn from the experience that we had here and build upon the successful lessons of this effort to replicate in future public engagement efforts.
All right. Thank you very much. Do a little sound check. Can you hear me okay? Good. Well, good morning. I'm John Helmer, Chair. Perhaps this is the last day I fulfill any functions as Chair of the Large Events Task Force. It's a real pleasure to be here. You know, for me personally, this is a topic that I have been working on since 2009. You know, there's sometimes an assumption that these things start at a particular time, according to when your awareness of it comes to bear. But for me, it's back to it's back to 2009. So I've been doing this for a while. And it's really, you know, frankly, it's a thrill, it's a pleasure to get to this point where we're making some decisions and resolving these long discussions. What I thought I would do for you is give you sort of a bit of a flyover here. I don't want to take your time reading through all the aspects of a complex report that I know you have seen and talk to the county administrator and others about. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the process, do a bit of overview, and then just a couple of concluding thoughts, and leave, I hope, plenty of time for whatever questions you have. Several people have mentioned in terms of process this what I think is a pretty remarkable effort. I must say it was a very much a pleasure to chair this group. 14-member task force. You all know when the numbers get up that high, that spells the possibility for difficulty in terms of process and hearing everybody. Tremendous group of people, diverse backgrounds and interests, and I couldn't be more pleased to have had the chance to know these people and work with them, and they really did work hard. It's, you know, the temptation to call them out each individually and thank them for specific things they did. I won't do that, but I will mention, you know, I think Randy Ledick deserves a lot of credit for doing quite the bulk of the writing on the report, and being very responsive and tuned into the tone and the content of the group. I'll stop there, but you know, each member of this task force really deserves credit. 20 meetings has often been said here. That's true. These were long meetings, substantive, but we also formed subgroups that worked on specific topics that worked between meetings, so that 20 is really just the tip of the iceberg. There was a lot of work done by groups of 4, 5, who got together during their work hours and their evenings, met with individuals to drill down into specific topics, and then do some writing, bring text, bring recommendations back to the broader group. So tremendous effort on the part of everybody. We ended up looking at more than 50 specific proposals that were generated by those subgroups. And when I say look at, we read each one, we amended it, we voted on amendments, we then voted on the amended total proposal. You know the score, how that works. So these are not taken lightly. These were crafted, some failed, some passed, many were revised. And that took, frankly, a period of months to get through those 50 proposals. Very rigorous process too. Not just a lot of work, but we talked to others. The report includes an appendix that lists the the other experts. There were 11 of them. This is Appendix C that we consulted in depth. And they really run the gamut from Lane County personnel like Andy Clark, County Counsel, and Matt Laird with the Land Management Division, through to Lori Siegel-Vatcher with Land Watch, and Steve McCoy, a farm and forest staff attorney with the Thousand Friends of Oregon, and then many other people, sheriffs, the Friends of Buford Park, and so forth and so on. And these are people who we really consulted in great depth. And then I guess I would say the thing that I take the greatest pride in, and I think this others have said it too, this group really needs to be thanked for and recognized for the transparency and the openness of this process. And that was really the hallmark. We talked about that up front, and we really held to it. And as Commissioner Sorensen indicated, you really have to ethically say this is the right thing when you hear that comment for the for the 20th time. But we had public comment both before and after every meeting. We heard, gee, it's hard to hear the discussion and then not have a chance to say something after. So we had public comment before and after every meeting. We had 2 open houses that were well publicized, and the public attended. They could meet with task force members, see our work, talk informally, provide written comment. We had a web form that allowed many people to simply write their comments using the Survey Monkey system. We had a rigorous survey that was mailed out and returned with a very high return rate. We used the Engage Lane County system. And then something that's less often known, perhaps because I mostly experienced it, but there was a lot of phone calls and email and so forth from the public between meetings. My personal cell phone and email account were out there. I made a real effort to keep anybody who expressed an interest informed, send them updates, and so there was quite a bit that happened there as well. Mike Russell and I collaborated on an article. It was in the Register Guard, encouraging people to participate. And one of the most interesting aspects for me was to see, I think we all know it takes a while to cut through and get the public tuned in, and so to see the interest grow over time and other parks groups appear. I mean, I think most notably the Zumwalt group that became quite influential, and their input was very helpful. And I should say the task force worked very hard to make this not about one park, about HBRA. Even though there were certainly some trigger aspects of that particular park, we really reached out to all stakeholders at all the parks in question. And then we also came and gave an interim report to you, as you may recall. And my main message then was, are we doing what you want? Are we exercising due diligence? Are we approaching this in a way that will, at the end of the day, make it possible for you to support this with enthusiasm? And I believe we have. That's what I'll be asking for today, is your enthusiastic support for the report. Final things I'll say on the process end. It's a huge amount of work for the county staff, for Mike, his staff, for Marcia, Steve, and big investment of time. And this is very much a partnership effort with many people within the county staff. And then finally, I think one of the things I really hoped to achieve with this was a process that was not, overly contentious, that we could maintain good relationships in the task force. And I'm really pleased with how that came out. I think we really have a kind of an esprit de corps. We have differences. Some of them you heard this morning. This is nobody's, perfect report for their personal opinion. But everybody was respectful and listened. And more than that, I saw movement. I saw people's opinions change gradually over time. I know mine did. We all learned a lot about the complexity of this process. So really pleased at the end of the day, the group really hung together well, and after 20 meetings in a year and a half, 14 people, that's a remarkable achievement. So in terms of the overview, again, in the interest of your time, I'm not going to go through all the details, but I did want to talk a little bit about sort of the focus of our effort, the principles that apply to all parks, the unique aspects of a couple of parks, and then the oversight. So that's what I plan to address here. First of all, just to remind you, the focus is on events of 1,000 people in attendance or more. I think that's sometimes forgotten. There's lots of things that happen that this report is silent on that have to do with rather large events. 950 people, if you will, would be a large, pretty big event. But we're not talking about those. So there's lots of latitude for smaller events that this report doesn't talk about. Important to note, too, that we identified really with county park staff health 10 candidate parks. I would, my personal sense that those are parks that have the potential for large events. Some of them might need some development. All of them, you could say it's appropriate for this kind of event, but not that kind of event. So I wouldn't attach too much importance to that specific 10. Those are the ones we think we should be talking about here, but it just really needs to have the potential to be used in this way. In terms of the principles, so, we're talking about a large number of parks. They all have individual characteristics. And if there's anything I could get across to you as a sort of overall message, it's very hard to make blanket statements about all the parks. They each have a particular setting, a particular road access, a particular level of development, etc. So you really, when thinking about principles, we try to be very careful to not be over-prescriptive and say, frankly, that human intelligence is needed to interpret the principles for each park. But there are some things that we felt really needed to be carried forward about all parks. And I would say the first one, and very powerfully for all of us, was safety. This is an area that we felt needs to be preeminent, and we need to use objective criteria. This is not an area of compromise. Clearly, we want the public to be safe when they're attending a large event. So there's a number of detailed recommendations that have to do with planning for safe events. Another overarching principle was really to be mindful of all of the deeds, master plans, lease agreements, etc., so that it probably should be, without saying that we would want to comply with those. And here I'll just quote a short passage from the report that says large events must be compatible with the spirit of and all specific provisions contained within any deed, lease, master plan, or other approved guidance documents. And this isn't just about HPRA. There are other arrangements that are with the that guide the use of a park. There are other guiding documents, if you will, and those need to be considered as an important aspect of how they're used. Appropriateness was a big area of consideration. So a lot of what we're talking about is what is appropriate in county parks. So again, we think in terms of the specific aspects of each park. So it needs to be a fairly unique set of determinations given the event and the park, but with some overall rules, one being that the louder aspects of an event, the loud sound would be limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. in all parks. Similarly, that camping associated with large events would occur only in developed campgrounds. Areas that are developed to support camping should be used for large events. And that each event also needs to have a traffic management plan. And there's a lot of detailed technical aspects to making sure arriving at an event happens in an efficient way in parking, and it's really closely allied with the safety as well. So traffic management plans. Revenue is another important aspect of this discussion, and I think My understanding is that maybe historically some of this activity got started from the point of view of needing to generate revenue. But I think, it's fair to say that what we heard from the public and what we concluded is that, where possible, net revenue, should be zero or positive. And I say net, not just revenue. In other words, revenue in excess of cost. But that's not really the only motivation. It might even make sense to put on some, it does make sense to put on some events that don't make money if they are in keeping with the mission of parks. It isn't all about money. And so it's revenue, not, a drain on the county is an important aspect, but not the overriding one. So those are some of the overall principles. I did want to talk about the unique characteristics of two parks that are specifically called out in the report, and those are Zumwalt and the Howard Buford Recreation Area. So in the case of Zumwalt, you'll note that we're calling for that park to be specifically indicated as the longstanding practice of having camping in association with the Oregon Country Fair should continue. And it's an interesting concept. Is camping even a large event? I mean, the large event is the Oregon Country Fair, and this is camping that's supported at Zumwalt. And our feeling was that this is an activity that should be specifically indicated as allowed. That's a very successful model there. In the case of HBRA, it's a bit of a longer message there. And here I think it's important to recognize clearly HBRA was sort of the trigger event, the trigger park, if you will, for all this activity. And it's, our recommendations really stem from looking at the deed, the master plan. This is a park that has a very detailed master plan, the history of its use, and even the public's input on the future of that park. So a couple of specific things to mention there just for context. The deed says, this is the deed from 1982, transferring the park from state ownership to county, says that it is specifically used for scenic public park, public forest, and recreation purposes. In fact, it goes on to state that if it's used for other purposes, the ownership would revert. It's really about scenic public park, public forest, and recreation purposes. So that's one of the aspects to keep in mind. The other, really, I think, more important is the master plan. There is a very detailed master plan that has been followed for some years for HBRA. And I think what we saw the task force doing is we're not rewriting the master plan. This is not within our purview. We don't have the expertise. That's a whole other process. But we're interpreting it. We're reading it. We're looking at its intent. We're helping to understand what does this master plan mean. So a couple of the key phrases from the master plan. It calls for primarily, quote, primarily low-intensity outdoor recreation and education activities while protecting, conserving, enhancing, and maintaining the natural, scenic, historic, rural, and recreational qualities of this large, strategically located regional park. The master plan also calls for the HBRA as a place where people, quote, can leave the noises, sights, and crowds of the city behind and experience the peacefulness of the rural countryside. And finally, just one other thing from the master plan, it says that the things people value about HBRA, the rural character, a place to hike, a place to ride horses, a place rich in its diversity of plants and wildlife, these are the things that should, at the very least, be preserved. At best, they should be enhanced by any changes that are made in the years to come. So those are some examples from the master plan that guided the task force. We also look at the history of its use. You see a park that has been used for a lot of smaller events. I think here of the Sheriff's Mounted Posse that does very important work out there, Boy Scout troops, that sort of thing. And then, as somebody mentioned, really the 30 years plus of successful events that have been supported by the community that the Arboretum has put on out there, the Mushroom Festival, the Wildflower Festival. So why are those successful? That organization has engaged with stakeholders for 30 years and talked about the impact of their events. They're one-day events. They're educational. They do not focus on amplified sound. They are clearly a very well-accepted type of large event. Important to say, not universally. I can find you people who would say those shouldn't happen out there either. I mean, you have a diversity of opinion. And then finally, thinking about HBRA, the task force talked about and heard about the future of that area and heard from the public. And in particular, there are a number of aspects, but one of them is, you note, the Willamette Confluence Preserve, the 1,200-acre Nature Conservancy property that is adjacent to, and who knows, perhaps will become part of HBRA someday. And it's clearly signals an intent on the part of the community in terms of how we're using this area. So with that preface in terms of how we considered HBRA, there are 5 specific rules that I'll point out that apply to the Harvard-Buford Recreation Area. The first one is it calls for 4 events per year with no more than 2 large events in any one calendar quarter. So you'll note this is similar to the kind of rules the county passed for private land in terms of the number of events per year. Again, it's in keeping, we believe, with the low impact use called for in the deed and master plan and this 30-year history that I mentioned. And I think it's important for you to know this is something the task force worked on very hard. Some might want to portray it as a close decision. And so this is one of the rare places where I'm going to dig all the way down and tell you about the vote. The vote on that final proposal of 4 calendar events per year with no more than 2 in any one quarter, that measure, that rule was approved by a vote of 10 in favor, 1 against, 0 abstaining. This was not a close decision. This was a group of 14 people with a very diverse background looking at this and saying this is an appropriate balancing point. This is an appropriate compromise for this park. We're also calling for in the report that large events should be limited to those with a primarily educational or nature-based theme. As with the other parks, that camping would only occur in developed campgrounds. Now, what that means for HBRA, it does not currently have a developed campground, so that means that there would not be camping in association with large events, at least not in the near term. And here again, I just want to emphasize the work this group did to come to these compromise positions and think about this, and the vote on the camping was 9 in favor, 0 against, 2 abstaining. So these are powerful compromises and powerful statements about some of the most difficult parts of the report. The duration of large events would be no more than 10 hours a day between sunrise and 7 p.m. for HBRA. And then finally, and maybe I almost could have put it in the front, the safety aspects of evaluating exit routes from this park, we think are very, very important. That they need to be looked at, improved if it's a cost-effective to do so. And then in the near term, that at the very least, the restricted or the lack of exit routes should inform the type, size, time of year of large events. You know, we've all just been through a summer in which that park was closed for, I don't know, a month, whatever it was, due to fire hazard. And I've lived out there for close to 30 years. That's happened in the past too. So it doesn't mean events can't happen there. It just means you really need to be cognizant of, should they happen during fire season, what are the implications for exit. And I think we would all hate to see some disaster out there where people got hurt. I'll wrap up my overview by talking about oversight. So principals are great, and I think we did a very nice job of coming up with guiding principles, things that you can look at to make decisions about what's an appropriate event. But people are really critical, and oversight is the key to if you will, a rational, prudent, and informed interpretation of those principles. I believe the group believes that the oversight group that is proposed is critical to this. And here I want to thank both Mike Russell and Pat Hoover, who you heard from before, because Mike and Pat and I together crafted the proposal for an oversight group that appears in the appendix to the report. So, in brief, it essentially makes use of the structures we have. It makes use of PAC, the Parks Advisory Committee, but then it augments that group with appropriate expertise and stakeholders to evaluate certain event applications. And it really calls for doing this in an efficient way that doesn't require lots and lots of meetings. We believe there's a seasonal aspect to this where a number of them can be dealt with at the same time. I think this is in many ways really the key to going forward, which is to have this kind of transparency and involvement. And again, this is one where some might have wanted a more cumbersome and bureaucratic process. Some might have wanted something that was, had less process involved. This, I think, is a nice balancing point. It capitalizes on the groups that we have. It's, it's doable. It is not an unreasonable burden, and it keeps the public involved. So I'll wrap up by saying, I think the Large Event Task Force report really is what we need. It calls for balanced use within limits. There are limits, but it's a balanced use. And it calls for a customized approach that respects the unique characteristics of each park. In other words, again, I've said it probably too many times, you just can't take a cookie-cutter approach to this. And importantly, given our history here, I think this will lay the groundwork in the structure for repairing relationships and building trust where they have been strained over the past few years. And I've been so personally just really impressed with the way people love their parks. I mean, there's 70 of them, and there are so many constituencies out there that adore these parks. And I think the people have spoken. I think we have had a lot of public input. We've had an outstanding, transparent process. And I think what I'm bringing to you is a report that is prudent and a reasonable compromise. My hope, my expectation is that the Board of County Commissioners should be, frankly, happy with this work and approve it for inclusion in the updated Parks Master Plan. And then the last thing I'll just say in terms of, since I know it's next on your agenda, I have been so tremendously impressed by the work of PAC to try to make sense of a master plan, to do the best they could with the resources that they had, and to reach out to the public and hear lots of concern about where the master plan is right now, and then just so very pleased to see your county administrator take this on personally and think about, okay, what's going to make this better, and to make use of the work that's done, but also recognize we need a new beginning, a restart, whatever you want to call it. So I did want to voice my support both for the full inclusion of the task force work into the Parks Master Plan, but also for the new approach, the new beginning on master planning that County Administrator Mark Heisky has called for. And I really appreciate, want to take this opportunity to note you did an extra fine job in your hiring of Mr. Mark Heisky. I'm pleased to see that. With that, I'll end. Thank you.
Commissioner Parr?
Thank you. Thank you, John, for a great report, and thank you for the enthusiasm with which you delivered it. And I think you very well captured the spirit of the group as I have witnessed it personally. When I stood on Jim Evanock's farm on a warm Friday evening quite some time ago, there's a place where normally you'd hear frogs croaking and the Willamette River rippling, and Mr. Evanock tried really hard to talk to me by putting his mouth about 1 inch from my ear and cupping his hands and yelling, and I still don't know quite what you said that night, but it wasn't real friendly. I caught the tenor, I didn't catch the words. But as I stood there on the farm that day looking around at the corn growing and, just the peaceful setting that wasn't peaceful that night, I thought, this is really no way to govern Lane County. This isn't the kind of setting we should have in Lane County. And not just because Mr. Evanock and his family were upset. It was upsetting to me, and my wife was sitting in our car, and she said, "What?" And she said, "Let's get out of here." And I said, "Okay, let's get out of here." But then as we were driving down the long driveway, I realized that Jim and his family couldn't get out of there. You were there, and that was the start of a long weekend. So Mr. Mokrzycki, you took the bull by the horns early in your tenure and assembled a committee. And Mary Moore testified to a particular point that I was pretty concerned about when I saw the makeup of the committee. What you said, Ms. Moore, is that I felt some of the not in my backyard sentiment at times when the committee initially meeting, when the task force initially began to meet. And I saw the makeup of the committee, and I thought, this is kind of heavy toward what may be a very reactive group to one single event. Well, I was pleased to note as the task force met and as the deliberations went along, I heard about them from my appointee to the Parks Committee, who was also on the Larger Events Task Force. I heard about them on a regular basis. And I found that ultimately the not in my backyard wasn't even a factor in the ultimate product that was delivered by this task force. So you came up with a report that encompasses 70 parks in Lane County that go from Hasita Head Lighthouse to the top of the Three Sisters, everything in between. And very comprehensive and very well done. Mr. Mokrzycki, this report is a culmination of a process that's really nothing short of monumental. It's a long process, nothing short of monumental. It's a model of public involvement that really can serve as a template for how difficult and contentious circumstances can be handled, in a manner that really produces a strong and well-received product. A product that's ultimately going to be heralded, well-received by anybody who sees it. There's a lot of detail in the report, and I'm not going to mention much of the details in the report. I think the unilateral approval of it, with a few notable exceptions that are well heard. I won't talk about the details of it, but I will say one passage that really fully sums up the work. There's just one passage from page 21 of the report that really stands it out. It says, "It became clear during the task force's deliberations that the mission of Lane County Parks is challenging to accomplish." Would you agree, Mr. Russell, with that statement?
Yes, I would agree.
I think anybody here would. 70 parks, 70 very different parks with very different neighborhoods, very different neighbors, very different transportation issues, and very different experiences to encounter. It also became clear from the public input opportunities provided by the task force that people are passionate about Lane County parks. I think that came out too. But often for different reasons. Some value natural and spiritual amenities that open space provides, while others enjoy the chance to simply experience the outdoors while exercising, camping, boating, fishing, or attending a festival or concert. So I think that little passage really sums everything up, sums up a lot of the work that went into it, and how your work is, it addresses a county that's almost the size of Connecticut with 70 parks and 43 acres of parks. Is that a good number?
4,300.
4,300 acres of parks. I knew that. I was trying to say 4,300 acres of parks. So, it's a very comprehensive work that really catches the spirit of the 350,000+ people that live in Lane County, and everybody lives within shouting distance of a park, and people use parks for different reasons, as you noted, for camping, boating, fishing, attending a festival or concert. And I think you summarized everything very, very nicely in what is a long report and what is 34 recommendations. Is that right, 34? which is about 2.5 recommendations for every single person on the task force. So well done. I just a great product. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and go. Mr. Helmer, before I get started, I want to thank you dearly for your work. We were in a very contentious point when you stepped up to lead this organization, and I want to thank your family too. You don't have 20 meetings with the leadership and the guidance without impacting a lot of your time with your family, so thank you and your family for that. Mr. Russell, I want to thank you and your staff for the same. You were involved, and you not only had your day job, but your evening job, and I want to thank you for that. People don't realize, I think, that you're not only the parks manager, but you're the animal services manager, and you have many different hats that you're doing and maintaining and making sure that we're operating. So thank you for the work on that. So with that, I can't say anything more than's already been said about the report. I think it's absolutely a great piece of work. It's a great piece for us to start rebuilding, like you said, relationships and trust has taken place. I too witnessed that same experience that Commissioner Farr spoke of that evening when windows are shaking and pictures on the walls are shaking and you can't hear having to shout at less than a foot distance from each other. I'm all for people having great experiences in our park system, but I don't believe that our experiences need to be driven by money, and they also don't need to be driven by the fact that people have to compromise or put up with that type of activity. And so, I'm confident with what you've created here that hopefully we won't experience that again, and it brings us into today's future. I'll share with you another experience. It was a completely different park, and quite frankly, I didn't know what was going on at the time that it actually happened. But I live out Mosby Creek, and I probably live, as a bird flies, maybe 3-4 miles from Blue Mountain Park. And one evening, and it was just a normal evening, weekend, and about 10 o'clock at night, I started hearing music, and my windows are all closed, and their windows are shaking, and I'm thinking, gosh, my neighbor's having a great party, this is cool. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, that's still going on. I'm thinking, okay, well, I hope this is the only night that it takes place. Well, come to find out the next day, that was an event that took place 3+ miles from my house. And I can't imagine what the people that lived within, hundreds of feet of that park, what they had to deal with, not to mention the noise, the traffic. And my dad commented to me the next day, he says, gosh, I can't believe how many people are walking down Mosby Creek back to town. It's like, it just, when we talk about safety and we talk about respect for other people, in my opinion, that's just totally uncalled for. And so, that is what we were faced with the board, and I want to thank, our administrator's guidance. He was dipped right into the fire as soon as he signed his contract and stepped to the plate. And, today, after a year and a half worth of hard work, I'm very pleased with what the outcome is. And I know that it's not going to be, a fit-all for everybody, but I believe that when you go so far as to analyze the spirit, the deeds, our master plans and what was intended, that this is a really good document. Another piece that I wanted to mention today too is that this board and many other people with the board's leadership in allowing us to try to find a way to acquire the Wildish property and bringing in the right people like the Nature Conservancy and their partners with BPA, they brought in another 1,200 acres of property that's connected or can be connected in the future to Mount Pisgah. And my personal hope, being involved with that, is that I hope that truly does become one piece of property that can be the showcase for, how they were able to restore and rehab the property from, its current use, and be able to bring back some of the values that we think are important in restructuring or rebuilding the stream structure, the river structure, and wildlife and habitat. And, I was really fearful that the path that we were headed on, that we had pretty much maybe possibly eliminated our ability to even see that dream take place. Not that it wouldn't exist, somebody else might be the manager, but I think that we would really be missing out, and our citizens would be missing out if we weren't able to see that come together as one. So hopefully that'll take place. Hopefully we're back on that path, and we can build that trust and relationships and strengthen them, and hopefully we'll be in a good place when that property is ready to be transitioned for public use. So with that, I'll look to my other colleagues for comments. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Stewart. And I just wanted to say a few things and maybe ask a few questions. In terms of acknowledging the people involved, I wonder if you could go over the list of the people and just maybe not say too much about each person, but just give us a flavor for the members of the Large Events Task Force.
Sure. So here are the members, a couple words on each. Besides myself, we have Jeff Galton, who was my vice chair. And in fairness, I should say he chaired one meeting, so I get credit for all 20. No, I think I missed the second meeting or something like that. Jeff is from Bicoastal Media, tremendous sense of humor, which you need in an effort like this, and but also great passion and experience organizing events. So, Jeff. Alan Murphy from the Sheriff's Mounted Posse, great background in terms of the posse's history out there. I think came to this with a very balanced point of view, very open mind, and a big performer on the group. Anna Lawrence, one of the CV Loop neighbors, one of 4. I think somewhere somebody said there were 5, but I think there were 4. So Anna is well known in the neighborhood and brought just a love of parks and clearly a passion to the topic. Brad Van Apple, Executive Director of the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, really can't say enough about how useful he was from a process point of view, as an author, as an expert, and also as an extremely balanced and fair person. I would say he was really one of the stars of our effort. Bruce Newhouse from the Friends of Buford Park and Mount Pisgah, who brought an environmental expertise. He was sort of our, technical environmental nerd, if you will. He really knows that stuff and could keep us informed. Dale Stoneberg, who was added late in the process, a little, just about halfway point or something like that, but comes with great experience with the county in terms of service on, I believe, the budget committee and other parts of the county. And he was brought in specifically to try to bring forward a somewhat younger demographic, so he was called the 18 to 34-year-old representative. Don Hansen, another CV Loop neighbor, I would say, Don is retired, a former employee of the county, but also just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, just very even-tempered and very open to hearing other opinions. And he was actually one of our primary authors, too. I think I credited Randy Fledick, but Don did quite a bit. Holly Stanley came to us from the Insight Hotel Management and really was able to bring, a needed perspective about the good aspects of large events, and that they are enjoyed, and you have to concentrate on the difficult things in a process like this, but she was very good at reminding us that these are positive things too when done right, the right kind of event, and also able to bring the economic impact of having tourism in the region, that sort of thing. Janice Ross, also from Travel Lane County, a similar kind of role, very much able to, very much with an open mind and a very strong work on our subgroups, and again, I think kept us focused both on the fact that we need to be talking about all the parks, not just one. That was always a struggle for us, to be really fairly representing them all, and she I think represented her group very well and reminded us of the economic, positive economic aspects of events when they're properly managed. Larry Dunlap from the Parks Advisory Committee, you heard today. Larry brought his expertise, long service on the Parks Advisory Committee. Sort of a let's try to cut to the chase, no nonsense. Let's get it done, and also, as you heard today, I think recognizing some positive aspects of large events and keeping us on track in that area. Leslie Scott, who runs the Truffle Festival and has worked with the UO Events Management, was, in some ways similar to Jeff. She brought really great event organizing expertise, and was also one of my most useful people to sort of question process and help me think through the right way to do things. Mary Moore, you heard from today, one of my favorite neighbors, always fun to hear. I think really great insights, and she did some of the best work to reach out to other parks groups. She's really should be credited with getting the Zumwalt folks clued in. Randy Lennick, who's appointed as a Parks Pass holder, a general member of the public, which he's far from a randomly chosen person out there. He has tremendous skills. His name is on the HBRA master plan from years ago. And again, very analytical mind, very even, and our primary author of the report. He deserves great credit. And then our stalwart support coming from Mike at every meeting, providing technical information, the gateway to his staff, and really producing excellent meetings, keeping our website on track, and all the rest of that. So I hope that wasn't too much, but that's a little bit.
No, I just think that it's been appropriate for people to congratulate you on this process and being the leader of the group, and I know you feel the same way, that the product of this task force is really the work of all these people and all the people that attended the meetings and did all the work, and not just you, but especially you, but maybe not just you. And I just think it was appropriate to have a moment where you just tell a little bit about all these folks, because I think a tremendous amount of work went into this, and this is a huge citizen effort. These people aren't paid. They don't work for Lane County government. They didn't get anything that I'm aware of out of this process, and I think it's been a good thing. I do have a question about one of the issues that brought up to me, and you did discuss it briefly in your presentation. That is, this is the Large Events Task Force, and large has been defined very specifically as 1,000 and more people in one location at one time. And I wanted to get a flavor for the questions that have been asked of me about events that are bigger than tiny, but smaller than large, and maybe get a little flavor for the kinds of events that are likely not affected by the concerns that the task force had in the report about events with 1,000 people or more. So what are some of those events that will be allowed or continued, or types of events that maybe aren't even happening now but would be allowed by the designation.
Start that, or
Sure, I can.
Say much here.
Commissioner, Chair Stewart, Commissioner Sorensen, the things that come to my mind are like the triathlon that we'll do at Fern Ridge, or a marathon that will happen at Armitage Park. Those are, 2,000-3,000 person events. 200-300 person events, growing each year, maybe potentially up to 600 people. Those events will continue to happen as they are. Many of our events, and we spoke to this with the committee, have been happening over time, grow over time, and so we work out kind of growing pains going through each year subsequently, and kind of get to a point where we've worked out all the safety concerns and everything, and things are kind of running on an annual basis, kind of, with check-ins each year. So we don't anticipate that to change with these recommendations. We do, for new events, we do want to consider, and I think the spirit of the task force also talked about those events smaller than 1,000, that maybe they have some niggles to them or red flags, that it would be okay to bring those to the oversight group, for example, to kind of bounce off of and say, this isn't an event of over 1,000 people, but there are, some concerns here. What do you think? And to be able to do that, there was latitude and acknowledgement that there would be opportunity to do that as well. So I think we'll take advantage of that.
Well, what about some of the things that we've heard about, like Civil War reenactments, or sheriff's posse, or Boy Scout troops, or nature education, events that are under the 1,000, but that are still important? Will they be allowed to continue?
Yes, they will be allowed to continue.
Are there any of these smaller events that are growing and would at some point reach the 1,000 threshold and therefore would be affected by these?
Yes.
What are those?
And that's why the marathon, I think, would be one. The triathlon. The Marist High School hosts a regional cross-country tournament at Richardson Park. That's been growing each year, that we think will reach that threshold.
Okay. All right. Now, let me ask you this. The Large Events Task Force really doesn't deal with money in the sense of how much money does it cost to operate Lane County Parks, where's the money come from, visitor fees, camping fees, marina costs or revenue, general fund, car rental tax. It doesn't really deal with any of that, does it? It doesn't deal with the economics of trying to provide these 70 park services and this over 4,000 acres.
Well, I'll start and let
Okay.
finish. We definitely were very tuned into that. In fact, we received detailed financial reports about the budget of parks and where the revenues come from, and specifically did our best to understand the net revenue associated with large events. What is the potential for providing positive revenue here? So we looked at that pretty carefully. We saw, it's a complicated area, especially when you do true cost accounting and you figure out what the actual profit, if you will, I'm not afraid to use the word profit, on an event would be. What we found essentially was that probably the biggest profit would come from the most highly impactful events, and even at that, they would take a period of years to reach a sort of a level of being known and being well run. And so, for instance, there's I think the estimate was the events that took place at HBRA and was netting perhaps $10,000 a year, so pretty small, and yet those are also the ones that are the least least acceptable. They're the most impactful events. So that's where, to me, I think what we ended up concluding was it's obviously a very important aspect of this, but there are reasons, there are great events that might not make money, and they are still worthwhile. I mean, the Arboretum puts on its events not to make money, but to, for other purposes because of its mission. And I think that would be true of the county as well. So we certainly noted that campgrounds appear to be an area of positive net revenue. And of course, Mike knows much more about that. So I'll let him.
Okay, well, the point is on my topic of events, many events will continue that are smaller than the, as I understand it, the 3 main large events will continue, and there'll be an additional opportunity for a 4th large event, i.e. over 1,000 participants, but that the threshold and purpose of the recommendations is to maintain these parks for public purposes, not for commercial purposes, and emphasize the recreational and natural features of Lane County parks rather than as a money-generating element of Lane County government.
Right. I think it's important to say that there's nothing specifically excluded. The very large, very impactful rock concert kind of event is going to be hard to find a fit. And I mean, the county staff has gone actually a step beyond in their memo saying we just don't think these should happen in county parks. The task force didn't go that far, but the reality is when you look at and you balance all the factors, that's the kind of event that probably can't happen, or it would have to be thought through very carefully and as to where that would happen. But nothing else is precluded. All of the smaller events that you mentioned are supported, and in fact there's probably a better mechanism than ever to evaluate those and support those. So that's
now the Lane
they're
County,
not in danger.
Okay, the Lane County Large Events Task Force though was really about large events not in Lane County but large events on Lane County parks.
Correct.
I mean, you didn't deal with large events like U of O football games or events that are large events, but are within Lane County.
Correct, Lane County parks. Okay. Much as we would love to have had our scope expanded yet further.
Well, I think I'm just really pleased that you led this group, Mr. Helmer, and I'm really glad you made some comments about each of the members, and I appreciate the hard work of the group, and I'm glad we're having this report today. Thank you.
So, in trying to be mindful of our time, Commissioner Lyken will be next. I'd like to try to wrap this up in about 10 minutes because we have 2 other items to deal with that are calling for 10 minutes apiece. And we have an executive session, and I know that the administrator has an appointment. So if we can, I'd like to be mindful of that. So, Commissioner Lyken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, John, I just want to share the accolades as well to you and then the entire committee, and Mike, thank you as well from the work and the staff. So a couple of questions, just as I was looking at going through the recommendations, did you get into the topic of vetting? Like, for instance, because this is around, where I'm going to focus on large events. Not the smaller events, but large events. Did you get into a topic of vetting each organization, say if they want to come in and have an event in Lane County in one of the parks somewhere? I would probably tend to agree somewhat on the rock concert side. I thought it was kind of humorous. You said 100 decibels. I think my garage band when I was in high school was over 100 decibels, but that's beside the point. That's a PV amp and a Stratocaster, but hey, that's, anyway, I think the vetting process would be key in this. I think that's really you can look back and learn from your experiences. That may have been an issue with Kaleidoscope. I'm not sure the group was vetted well enough going forward. So just if you've had those conversations during the task force.
Yes, we certainly have. I mean, briefly, what is envisioned is an assessment tool, which is really an organized way to look at all of these factors that the oversight oversight group would use. And one of the factors is definitely the reputation and the background. You've correctly pointed out, I think a number of people knew Kaleidoscope was probably, by reputation going to be a problem, and that could have helped that. So, yeah, absolutely, that's part of the vetting process.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I asked Jeff to serve on the group, and I didn't think it would have been appropriate if I would ask Kit, but that's another story. My business does business with Kit, my family's business, so but Jeff is an experienced promoter, and has been for a long time, and I thought and I would think he'd understand going through the vetting process probably as well as anybody. And on the other piece, so I saw you got down, you discussed security, you had all that, but that's all part of the vetting process, in my view, is to find out exactly if a promoter is organized or a promoter has the experience. They would know exactly how many folks they need to contract for security, how many porta potties they would need, how much portable water they would need to have on hand, so on and so forth, because, I mean, that's key, especially if it's a multi-day. I mean, that's one of those things. And also the state law. State law does cut off at 10 o'clock, by the way. Now, you can get waivers. I know the city of Eugene, I think, provided waivers for, you'd say, for instance, Eugene Celebration to go beyond 10 o'clock. But it should be cut off at 10 unless you were granted some sort of special waiver. And so that was pretty interesting. But anyway, I just really want to say to you and the entire group, this was very well done. And I'm really impressed. And I think it at least provides a good roadmap going forward on how, staff in particular will work through this. If there's some opportunities for Lane County, I'm intrigued with the earlier, and this may be part of the overall parks presentation by the gentleman who came about the RV park opportunity. Let's not forget, we have the 2021 World Games coming up. And 5 years is going to be here before we know it. And that's, if we think the Olympic trials is significant, the mayor that I served with, John McCardle, actually was a hammer thrower in the 1980 Olympic trials and the 83 World Games. And he will tell you the World Games makes the Olympic trials look minute. And so this could be a golden opportunity for Lane County going forward. But I just want to say thank you very much, John, and the entire members of the task force that are here today. I really, really appreciate the work you did. And I think this allows some opportunity for Lane County going forward. So thank you.
Mr. Mokrycki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I received an email late last night from Commissioner Bozovich, and he asked that I share this with you since he's not able to be here today. And he says, although the need to represent Lane County's interests in Salem require me to be absent at today's board meeting, I just wanted to let you know that I fully support staff's recommendation to approve the recommendations of the task force. And again, he asked that I share that with the board and the public.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to approve item order 15-11-1009.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of order 15-11-10-09, the matter of accepting the recommendation of the County Administrator's Lane County Parks Large Events Task Force and directing staff to implement the recommendations into regular administrative process for acceptance, review, and approval of large event applications and incorporate recommendations as appropriate into the next Lane County Parks Master Plan update.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozovich excused. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
And I want to make sure that my comments for the thankfulness of everybody involved is for everybody. I singled out the leadership because I know how hard leadership is and to accept that task. But thank you for everyone for the commitment and time put in. All right. So we'll move on to the next item, which is C. It's an update on the Parks Master Plan process. And once again, we have the administrator. And we also have Marcia Miller, our Public Works Director, and continuing on is Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and I'm mindful of the time at our time certain 11 o'clock exec session, but wanted to provide just a brief report to you on the overview of where we're at in our Park Master Plan process and proposed process going forward. I think as the board certainly appreciates the current Park Master Plan for Lane County was created in 1980. So my math is it's 35 years old. It's about time that we think about updating that. In fact, Lane County has made efforts over the past 10 years attempting to update the master plan, and those are well documented. I believe back in February of 2010, if I recall right, the board had a discussion at that time about the update. That is stalled for a number of reasons, not the least of which is budget reductions in parks and staffing constraints. So more recent efforts have been made over the course of the past several months to reinvigorate that process. Our staff has developed a draft plan that was presented to the Park Advisory Committee and has been reviewed by the Park Advisory Committee in great detail at a number of meetings. They have subsequently gone out and sought public feedback. We've had 5 meetings throughout Lane County that in many cases have been well attended. We've received over 200 written comments. I believe commissioners have been copied on many of those communications. So we've had, I want to recognize really the outstanding work of the Park Advisory Committee through this process to focus on updating this effort as a priority, the great work of our staff in putting forward a draft and making this a priority. In fact, it's in the board's strategic plan as a goal. Again, we've seen great public feedback to date, and we find ourselves at a transitional stage in the process now, and wanting to reflect on the public feedback that we've received. And we've also, as you just saw, want to learn from the examples that have been set through the Large Events Task Force and that wonderful public engagement process. And so this has caused us to have a number of conversations with members of the Park Advisory Committee, with folks in our community, with our partner agencies, including Willamette and the City of Eugene and others throughout the community, on making sure that the process we follow is based on industry best practice, and that we take the effort that has been begun, that has been ongoing for 10 years and more recently reinvigorated, and that we really focus it and implement, industry best practices. And so there are a couple of recommendations that we're making now, and again, these are based on a lot of feedback that we have received from all of those individuals and groups that I mentioned. The first that you have now heard about is the concept of creating a task force that will be complementary to the roles of the Park Advisory Committee and the board, which are really to, the Park Advisory Committee and the board establish the priorities and the policies, review the document, ultimately approve the document. But the concept of a task force, which came notably from our friends at Willamette Park and Recreation District, as part of our outreach and due diligence, had conversations with Bob Kiefer, who many of you know is the director of Willamette Park and Recreation District, well respected in the community for the great work that he's done at Willamette. In fact, he was here in Lane County for a number of years, and we shared with Bob our proposal that we wanted to bring forward to the PAC and to the board to look at the different areas that we laid out. And one of the things that he recommended was, you should consider the appointment of a Blue Ribbon Task Force. This could aid in the work of the PAC and the board in broadening public engagement and support, formalizing that, making sure that we have representation from all areas of the county. We've certainly heard from Florence and folks throughout other areas of the county that have particular interest and concerns about our parks and about the master plan effort. So that concept came from Willamette, and we think it has some merit, and we had the conversation with the PAC last night. I want to hear from the board on your thoughts on that, and we're open to the composition of what that group will look like, but again, the idea is that it would formalize the public engagement and broaden the public engagement work and provide sort of an ongoing effort to make recommendations on the process moving forward. The other piece of this is to bring on a park planning specialist. This is consistent with what Willamette and the City of Eugene have done in their park master plan updates. So again, it's an industry best practice. We've had conversations with Mr. Kiefer at Willamette, and I've actually talked to Carolyn Burke, who's the planner at the City of Eugene, who's leading Eugene's park master plan effort. So we think that has merit in making sure that we have the technical expertise necessary to lead a process that will carry this master plan to the finish line. And so we are, Ms. Miller and I are in the process of having conversations with individuals and firms regionally, locally and regionally to identify those. We're going to do a request for qualifications and do interviews that will include members of the Park Advisory Committee in that process. And that's task number one, as we believe, we feel, is to bring on that park planning specialist and then evaluate and develop the role for the task force, develop the clear process and timeline going forward, have regular updates to the board and the Park Advisory Committee on the process, make sure that we're touching base on significant policy issues. I'll bring Ocean Woods as an example because we all have certainly seen the comments about that. That reference in the draft master plan is in regards to a board order that was approved in 2004. But we have a different board today. There's only one commissioner that was on that board in 2004 that's still on the board. And so we think those are the types of policy discussions that we need to bring back to the board and say, okay, it's 11, almost 12 years later. What does this board want to do? Let's revisit the issue. Let's listen to the public feedback we've received, and let's establish the policy based on what this board would like to see. So those types of issues need to come to the board, and we need to seek your guidance and feedback and incorporate that policy direction into the draft plan and go back out into the community. So these are the steps that we're recommending. We also, as part of the work in bringing on a park planning specialist, we need to clearly define those roles. What is the role of the Park Advisory Committee and the board? What is the role of this task force? What is the role of staff and the role of the public? And have those expectations laid out clearly in the beginning. And then I will just say, you know, in a note to the last conversation that we had, we need to start from what is our vision? What is the purpose of our park system? And what is our vision for our park system? This should be an inspirational document and process that people can gather around and feel good about. Despite all the challenges we have with funding our park system, that's an important issue. Let's start with what's great about these 70 parks and 4,300 acres of parkland. And we know, I think, as a result of the work that was just completed and approved by the board and the Large Events Task Force, that we're not going to maintain our park system on the backs of large events. That's not how we're going to generate funding for our parks. So the funding issue, we need to have conversations about how to make investments to generate revenue like we have at Armitage Park. We generate a net $200,000 a year in revenue. And the amenities and services there are consistent with what our residents and park users want in their park system. Those are the types of investments that we should be making. Things that generate revenue but are consistent with the mission and purpose and vision that we have for our parks. So I'll leave it there, and again, I know we're short on time, but I'll offer if Marcia has any additional comments to add and then questions from the board. And we're not asking for action from you, but certainly comments and your thoughts about that proposal, and I'll make a clear statement and commitment that we intend to come back to the board once we've identified the individual, the park planning specialist individual to lead this effort. Again, it would not be a county employee. I want to make that clear. It would be a contract person that we would enter into a scope of services, define costs and timeline. And once the work is done, then we will no longer need those services. So we'll report back to the board. My intent is in the next few months, once we have that staff in place and have a clear process and timeline outlined.
Great.
I'm not sure what I could add to that, except to say that I think that our draft master plan has come a long way, but it has brought us to this point, and I think that this is a good kind of launch for us to take it to the next level. So Icahn, you can see the background information there. That, so we have a lot of good, solid work to start with here. I think that I've had people from the outside who have experience in parks and parks master planning saying it's really better than anything you've had so far, which is a good place to start. So I think that taking it to the next level, and we have had a fair amount of interest from some parks planning consultants so far who seem to be kind of excited about this notion of working with us on this project. So we'll be moving forward.
Great. Commissioner Lycan and then Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, thank you for that. I would concur. And first of all, I would also say that as someone who's extraordinarily bullish on Willamette Lane Park and Recreation System, I think that was a good piece to reach out to Mr. Kiefer, and while we still have him, because he's getting close to retirement. So I'm glad that you reached out to him, and I think that's important. So I like the way you framed this. It's kind of a reset, and I think it makes a lot of sense, especially when you're dealing with the county from the Cascades to the coast. Pretty unique setting that we have, so I appreciate that, and I would highly recommend you start going down this, especially with the contracting out. I think it's good maybe to have a fresh set of eyes, maybe come in and review, and that this takes nothing away from staff or the advisory committee or anything else, because the work that's gone into it's been very, very good, and I appreciate all the work, Pat, and your group, and I really appreciate the work you've done, but sometimes it's good to just have a fresh set of eyes. So I would highly recommend moving forward on this Blue Ribbon Task Force, or whatever you want to call it. So, thank you.
Mr. Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is good, Mr. Mokrahayski, and I anticipate a similar process with similar results that we just had a report on regarding the Large Events Task Force. Last night, you were at the Parks Advisory Committee meeting, and over the weekend I'd heard from a couple of members of the Advisory Committee that there's a little consternation regarding an article that was published in the paper that kind of got the horses out of the gate a little bit early. And there was some concern from some members that maybe the Parks Advisory Committee was going to be bypassed, overlooked in some fashion. You were at the Parks Advisory Committee meeting last night. You made a presentation. You talked about that already. And Ms. Miller, you were there. Mr. Russell, you were there. Ms. Hoover, Mr. Dutoit was there. Ms. Satani was there. Mr. Helmer was there. And Ms. Moore, I'm pretty sure, you were there last night. And can you characterize how the committee responded to what you had to say about this report last night, or this process last night?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say that they were, of course, I hate to speak on behalf of others, but what I interpreted from the comments was an appreciation for an understanding, first of all, for where we're at, an appreciation for the fact that we're listening, that we're really attempting to listen to the feedback that we've received, and that's how we characterize this, is, we're making these recommendations as a result of what we've heard from members of the Park Advisory Committee. You've heard them here in prior public testimony, from feedback we've received from all corners of the county about the work so far. So if there's anything I hope and I think that they took away from last night, it's that Lane County is listening to feedback that we received, and we're trying to thoughtfully incorporate that feedback into improvements in our processes and on the decisions that we make. So I think we're trying to be humble here and say, we have good intent, we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to make investments that are critical and on behalf of our residents, and we're also listening to that feedback. And so I think they appreciated that. What I heard was strong support for what we were proposing. They wanted to hear more about the task force and the composition of the task force and the role of that task force. And our commitment was to come back once we've identified the park planning specialist and engage the PAC in that effort and the role of the task force. And so, I felt good leaving that meeting that we were generally on the same page moving forward.
Excellent. And I was pleased to see that you were all there and bringing that up right in a very proactive fashion. I'll say again, the mission of Lane County Parks is challenging to accomplish. And I think based on what you're saying and what I observed last night, we can rest assured that the Parks Advisory Committee, the very valuable Parks Advisory Committee, is not being bypassed in any way for this process. In fact, it is an integral part of developing, redeveloping, and rewriting the master plan. And I think you're proposing an excellent excellent process, and I'm looking forward to the result. Thank you.
Mr. Mokahysky, I agree. I think that what you proposed, I'm supportive of the effort. I'm very thankful that you reached out to Lime Lane and are reaching out to other park consultants for some, specialized park advice. The only thing that I would add as a comment is that, as you can see, I don't know that that's the master plan, but if it is, the current state of the master plan is a huge document, and possibly as you think about moving forward, it would be nice, I know that folks are involved, like it would be nice to have the Parks Advisory Committee, if you could bite off chunks, maybe you start with mission vision and make sure that it's correct, and then send it to the draft for their comments, and have kind of a working group where they're actually reviewing the process, giving their feedback to see if it can be tightened up. That way you just don't have this huge document that you drop on their laps, and that they can be utilized through the process. And maybe that's what's intended, but that would be my comment, is to see if there's a way to bring them along up to speed, get their comments and stuff, so it's not all this, okay, we finished this phase, let's move to the next one type of a deal. It'd be more timely, and I think they would add some valuable input as they review it. Mr. Sorensen, do you have any comments?
Well, I just wanted to say I do support the work that you're doing to involve Willamette Lane. I do support the work you're doing internally to identify a park specialist or a position within our Lane County Parks Division. I support that. I support the effort to get a new parks master plan, and all the work that's been done by staff and the large events task force, the Parks Advisory Committee over the years on all this should all be used to make another revision of the plan. And I think that as I've been up here for a number of years, I would say one of the challenges, it's why I asked Mr. Helmer about the economics or money to run the park system, is that the board has cut off the use of the car rental tax to the Parks Division. It's caused, in my opinion, a lot of dislocation. I think we could directly say that the unhappiness over the large event that created the most spectacular opposition was in part related to a decision the board made to get rid of the money, take it away from the Parks Division. So, we really need a big vision for Lane County's parks. The acreage is huge, the usage is huge, the needs in the community are really important, and I think we need to tie our parks together with our concerns of obesity and recreation and needing less obesity and more recreation, and we need to have a vision of open space that the metropolitan area of Eugene and Springfield needs, regional parks and regional open space, and then for our more distant from Eugene communities, particularly Florence and the Upper Willamette Valley, McKenzie Valley, we need to make sure that these parks are available for an even bigger set of users out there that come to our parks, and will be coming in greater numbers in the future. So I'm very supportive of what you're doing. I would like to see in the budget that's being proposed, I would love to see money, because I don't think you can do a lot without money. And if the board, through approving the large events task force, has really made a policy choice I support, to not try to make money off of Lane County parks as a way to get away from putting public dollars, unrestricted public dollars, into the park system. So to me, I would like to see the next time we get together for a big picture budget gathering to talk about the Lane County budget for next year. I'd like to see a discussion of how we're going to provide funding for the parks so we can serve the people of the community. And maybe I'll ask you just this, particularly Ms. Miller and Mr. Mokryski, what is actually going to be the trend in the budget next year? What are you proposing? What are you asking for? In the case of Public Works, what are you asking for? In the case of the administrator, you know, we're going to appoint a budget, I believe the term is manager, no, budget official. I think it's budget official. We appoint a budget official every January. Oregon budget law requires us to do that. And every year I've been here, we've appointed the county administrator or acting county administrator as the budget official. So we'll probably do that again. I would just guess. So that's kind of a request issue and a proposal issue. Because to me, in some ways, talking about the paper, talking about the policies, and then not talking about the money is really not talking about the policy.
Commissioner, before that's answered, is this something that you could take via email?
Yeah, absolutely. This is just an ongoing thing.
We're at 11 o'clock.
And I agree, and I'm sorry to, having done this job you're doing right now, I totally respect it, and I'll let you guys off with, send me your comments, if any.
So question, Mr. Mokryski, I believe you got guidance, support for the direction you're recommending with a couple extra questions. So it is 11 o'clock. Do you think we could take the next item, or should we bring that up after the executive session?
We have an 11 o'clock time certain, so executive session, that is. So
we ought to probably go into executive session and then come back out after that, okay?
Yeah.
So with that, I'd like to, the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of the public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660, subsection 2, subsection H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed above. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions will be made in executive session, and we will return back into public session as soon as the executive session is concluded. So with that, we will move up to the BCC. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear you indicate, you may want to indicate if you intend to reconvene in the BCC after the exec session.
And for those, the media, most importantly Metro TV, we'll just reconvene up in the conference room following the executive session. So with that, we will go to the BCC for executive session.
Following the presentation a month ago, having gotten the feedback and the questions from the commissioners, then taking that, what this is coming back on with a grant process, and this is a recommendation and an outline of what we would propose doing based on that feedback. And the parts that I would call your attention to on it are, first, that it is a qualifications-based selection, which is, I think, uniformly has been what Travel Lane County and everyone else associated has wanted. If you look at the segments on it, basically, instead of asking for a specific marketing plan, this sort of thing, we're asking for a more qualifications-based, less commit now to what you're doing, but more what are your qualifications and what can you accomplish in terms of some goals. Secondly, it contains a provision that, if possible, there will be a single grantee if the commissioners find that's possible, which is one of the things that was an issue before, and so added that into the process. And the third thing I call your attention to is that there is an outline then of what would be in the agreement. We talked a little bit about what the performance measures would be, the reporting periods, and so on, and those are outlined in that memo as well. And finally, there's a proposed timeline that has been, that we've gone through with staff and that county administrator has reviewed and offered his feedback on for when we might make the original award. And then timelines going out into the future for how long such a grant will be in place, and that even specifies the dates at which. One of the things we discussed is being able to have an agreement that goes out a couple of years, but then being able to continue renewing in advance, so that it's a three-year issue, but can be a continuing grant as well. So those are all in there, and those I think of the points. And the main thing, reason that I believe that the county administrator wanted me to bring this to you, was to go back, confirm this is what we were talking about. I think all of this is acceptable to any of the potential proposers we've talked to, including Travel Lane County. And so if this is correct, if this matches your expectations, then I think the belief is that the county administrator will get a few people together to write the specific criteria for what qualifications information we want, get it published on that schedule, get the responses back, and then make the recommendations, and then the commissioners will make a selection of grantee or grantees, depending on the commissioner's will. That would happen in about February of next year, much earlier than in the past.
Okay. Commissioner Park?
It's correct to say that Travel Lane County, the executive director, and the board is apprised of this, and everything is moving forward, just as the board had directed. So, yeah, it's a huge step in the perfect direction.
Other questions, comments? All right. Thanks, Mr. Cheney, for that update. Appreciate that. So item 8 is Commissioner's business. Do we have announcements? Yes, we do.
But I'll make a written report rather than I will make a statement. A new release is coming out today regarding Operation 365. We're committed to housing all homeless, getting our homeless veteran population to 0 by the end of this year. We're on target to do it. We're over 300 veterans formerly homeless or in imminent danger of becoming homeless. Veterans have been housed so far this year. We're going to do it. It was in response to the White House Ending Veterans Homelessness Challenge. Kitty Piercy and I were committed, with your permission, committed the county and the city to move in that direction, and we're going to do it. So at the end of the year, January 1st or December 31st, we should be able to state our goal has been reached. 165 veterans have been housed in Lane County this year. So, wonderful. It's great. I'll give you more of a written and detailed report on how that happened. It's one of the greatest cooperative events that I've ever really seen between public, private, and nonprofits, with real heavy leaning on nonprofits. Most of the funding has come through nonprofits. Most of the action happens at the nonprofit level. But a little bit of coordination is happening at the government level, and the private, particularly the landlords associations, really step up to the plate to make this happen.
Great. Commissioner Electric?
And speaking of Veterans Day, so tomorrow's Veterans Day.
And that's why I'm going at 1:30.
Veterans Day, I commend Commissioner Barr to all of our other veterans, including my father and father-in-law. And tomorrow I'll be participating in the Veterans Day event with Senator Byer in Springfield. I'm looking forward to that. I remember I used to do events like this constantly when I was mayor, so it's fun. We're going to get back into the action as a commissioner, and it'll actually be at Corky Gorley's office at State Farm, who's also a veteran, so this will be a lot of fun.
Is there a parade in Springfield?
There was on Sunday.
Unless it's Sunday.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Questions? Nothing? All right. And we've covered it, but are there any agenda team requests or work session requests? Okay. I don't know. Mr. Rickoff, are you able to give us a review of assignments?
Commissioner Stewart, I think I have only 2 assignments that I'm aware of. One is the report back on the Parks Master Plan, and the other is getting an executive session meeting within the next week to 10 days.
Perfect. Okay. Any further business? Seeing none, we're adjourned.